And we return to our American stories. And up next, you're going to hear from Connecticut Shorty. And yes, you heard it right. That's the name she goes by. And she also happens to be on the board of the Hobo Museum. And you heard that right, too, the Hobo Museum. And she is here to share the stories of the history of the American hobo.
Betty Moylan is my given name. My hobo name is Connecticut Shorty. Hobo names usually are given to you by someone, another hobo usually, but some people will pick their nickname they had when they were a kid or a nickname somebody gave them along the way. My hobo name, Connecticut Shorty, came from an old-time steam air hobo named Steam Train Mari Graham. A steam air hobo is a hobo that rode steam trains, and he gave me my name in Logansport, Indiana, in 1992 at a railroad festival. He decided that should be my name, so that's my name. Prior to that, I had a hobo name. It was Twinkle Toes, because I was kind of a dancer, you know. So my sister's hobo name is New York Maggie. I gave her that name because although we were both raised in Connecticut, she raised her family in Rochester, New York. She left when she was fairly young, so I gave her the name New York Maggie. My brother is very thin, so his hobo name is Slim Tim. Redbird Express, he picked up his name because he was a truck driver. You know, when he was driving the truck, they called him Redbird Express, so he kept that as his hobo name. Connecticut Tootsie, her father used to give Tootsie Pops to the kids in his shoemaking store, so she took the name Connecticut Tootsie in honor of her father. Slow Motion Shorty was an old-time steam air hobo. He had hit by a car a couple of times walking along roads, and he moved pretty slow. Of course, he had a lot of injuries. So the hobos called him Slow Motion Shorty. Oh, Hard Rock Kid, he got his name. He was a hard rock miner out in the West. He liked to mine those minerals and stuff, so he got the hobo name Hard Rock Kid. So they come from a variety of places, different names. They're kind of fun. A lot of people mix up the American hobo. I say American hobo because it's really only an American phenomena, this hobo person that rode trains. A lot of people mix up the hobo with the homeless or the local people that, you know, hang around towns and beg and stuff. So classically, the hobo worked and wandered, and they were homeless by choice. Some of them had homes. They could go home if they wanted to. You know, a lot of them had families and homes, or a relative would take them in, but they didn't want that. They loved to be out American wandering. They didn't want to have a home. It sort of gave them claustrophobia or something. They had to be outside. A classic example is my father. Now, he married my mother in the 1940s, and he had hoboed before he met my mother. So he tried very hard to settle down. He had 3 children, there's 3 of us, and he did his best, but there was a lot of problems in the marriage because he was restless. Sometimes he'd leave and disappear for 3 or 4 days. And then eventually the marriage ended and he left. So we were raised by our mother, and he went back to hobo, and he worked and wandered his whole life. He just rode trains and wandered around America and worked. So there's all kinds of stories connected with hobos having to, I guess you can't explain it to a person that doesn't have it. It's called the wanderlust, where you just can't stay there. You can't settle down into a home and a normal kind of life, what we call normal. But to a hobo, a normal life was wandering around and picking up odd jobs to make enough money to keep going and just to see what's going on all over the country. So the classic definition of a hobo is they wander and work to wander, because they don't mind working and they'll take a variety of jobs, but they get restless after usually just a couple of months tops, and they just got to get on the road and see what's going on down the tracks, basically. So they leave the jobs, short-term jobs. They started pretty much after the Civil War. A lot of the veterans, of course, didn't want to go home, or they couldn't go home depending on their personal circumstances. And they had been, you know, a lot of them wandering around, you know, fighting, of course, for 5 years or so. So they started following the railroad, working for the railroad, and just wandering and working. But they'd do anything. They'd paint, they'd wash dishes in restaurants. They took all kinds of jobs just to stay for a short term. Some of them worked in lumber camps, like that Hard Rock Kid. He'd work in mines. They worked a lot of the migrant farm work. But they really helped develop the country because the farmers needed the help. It wasn't the modern generation where machines can do so much today. It was all manual labor and stuff, so they were happy to have this big work crew of people show up seasonally, most of them, like they'd pick apples in Oregon. New York State had apples. The hobos would go to New York State to pick apples and cherries and stuff, so they were all over the place. And they'd hold up in camps that were called hobo jungles. This is where they'd gather and meet each other and cook what they call hobo stew, just a pot of water and all kinds of vegetables and stuff. And if they had meat, they'd throw that in. But it filled up a lot of people. That's the reason they cooked that, because it would fill up a whole camp of people. They share stories. They talk about where the jobs were. Some of them would play music. Now, the Woody Guthrie hobo, he carried a guitar, but very few people carried a guitar. Most of them actually played the harmonica, the ones that played an instrument, because they could just slip that in a pocket or a little bag or something, you know, because it's when you're getting on trains, you can't be carrying all this big stuff like guitars. And actually, they never even carried walking sticks on trains. They were in the way when you're trying to, you know, jump on trains. Most of them would get on off trains when they were moving. They may pick up a walking stick and carry it around the town or something, you know, for things that might try to hurt them. So historically, it came down as fact that this is what the hobos did, but they weren't really riding trains with a walking stick. Some of that stuff becomes folklore. Most of them carried what we would call a bindle or a bag slung over their shoulder. It was more practical. Some of the hobos would dry their socks hanging them on trees and sticks and stuff. One time, this old timer had a cane now, so he was drying his socks on his walking stick. The hobos were originally meeting in the Chicago area. It wasn't really the city of Chicago. It was a lot of the surrounding smaller towns prior to 1900. About 1899, word had come to Britt that the hobos were unhappy meeting in the Chicago area. Police were hassling them and this and that, and they wanted to go somewhere else. So these business people in Britt, Iowa, there was 3 or 4 main business people. They decided, well, why don't we invite the hobos to come to Britt, and this will give us, you know, national recognition as a city. It was a railroad town, and, you know, it'll have tourists come and spend money, and this will be a good thing for us. So they got a hold of one of the hobos. He was the grand head pipe of these hobos that were meeting in the Chicago area. His name was Charles Noe, and the grand head pipe was the spokesperson for the hobos and the chief negotiator. So he came to Britt in 1899 and met with these business people, and they did the negotiations for him to start spreading the word for the hobos to come and have their convention there. And probably the biggest reason that got him interested in having the hobos come to Britt was they promised him that the hobos could have all the free German suds that they wanted, a type of free beer. So this was a really big ticket item for these hobos. So they all agreed to come, and then 1900 was going to be the first convention held in Britt. And they came, most of them came by trains. Of course, there was all kinds of trains back in those days. And there was notoriety all over the country. Papers out in California, Illinois, all over the country carried this first annual convention. Well, they didn't call it an annual convention, this hobo convention going to be held in Britt. And then that was pretty successful. So then after that, Britt started inviting the hobos. They just started coming back every year, and we still have an annual convention today. The hobo community people come into Britt. I wouldn't classify them as classic American hobos anymore, but a lot of heavy-duty rail riders still come in. And we sit and we have a meeting, and in the old days, they would talk about, of course, where jobs were and what's going on around the town or something. Now we pretty much talk about our community, what we need to do in the jungle maybe to make it better, and if there's any issues in the town, we try to resolve them, things like that. But we still actually have an annual hobo convention meeting in the city of Britt every year.
And you're listening to Connecticut Shorty tell the story of the American hobo. By the way, when she says Britt, she's talking about Britt, Iowa. That's where the hobo convention is held each year. And hobos, well, they want to distinguish themselves from homeless people. This is their lifestyle. This is how they choose to live, work and wander, Connecticut Shorty said. And indeed, her father, well, he worked and he wandered, and then he kept wandering. But she didn't resent him for it. Clearly, she's chronicling the hobo life. And when we come back, more from Connecticut Shorty of the Hobo Museum here on Our American Stories.
Welcome back to Winter Hack Radio, the place for clever hacks to survive the season. Icy driveway? Well, try spreading sand or birdseed to help with traction. Snowy puppy paws? Well, grab a whisk, brush it off, done. Catch COVID-19? Well, just get...
Actually, there's no hack for COVID-19. But if you test positive, prescription medications for COVID exist. Ask your doctor if they're right for you. Visit PfizerForAll.com to learn more. Sponsored by Pfizer.
You still thinking job change in the new year?
Yeah, I need something that's in high demand and more stable in this economy.
IT?
Yeah, cybersecurity, maybe even AI.
That's what I did.
Really? How?
Went to My Computer Career. You don't need any prior experience, and you could start your new career in a matter of months. A lot of IT pros go to school there, too, to level up.
Sweet. Are classes online or on campus?
Both.
Wow, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Make this your year. Take the free career evaluation now at mycomputercareer.edu, an elite CompTIA certification partner.
Financial aid is available to those who qualify, including VA benefits.
10 athletes will face the toughest job interview in fitness that will push past physical and mental breaking points. You are the fittest of the fit. Only one of you will leave here with an iFit contract for $250,000.
This is when mindset comes in.
Someone will be eliminated.
Pressure is coming down.
Trainer Games on Prime Video January 8th. Watch the trailer on trainergames.com.
Hey, I'm Mike Slater. My dad passed away at the age of 63. It's out of nowhere. Had a stroke. Super hard, obviously, for the whole family, but my dad had life insurance. This is why I have life insurance for my family, for my wife and 4 kids. And the best place to get life insurance is ethos.com, because you can do it in 10 minutes. And there's no medical exam and no blood test, just a few health questions. Get life insurance in 10 minutes so your family is protected. Ethos, ETHOS, ethos.com/Mike.
Rocket Grab Plus.
As we wish you a happy new year, we remind you we have a special edition of the Our American Stories, our weekend program that we're bringing to you in place of the Art Lewis Show today. In the 11 o'clock hour, it's the Ag Week in Review, or the Ag Year in Review from Brownfield. At noon, we'll broadcast the Toast to the President of the Office of the United States with Art Lewis helping with the introduction. It's 10:32.
And we continue with Our American Stories and to Connecticut Shorty on the history of the American hobo. She had just told us of the long-standing tradition called the Hobo Convention that takes place each year in Britt, Iowa. Let's return to Connecticut Shorty.
Originally, the Hobo Convention was run by those business people that I mentioned. And the early hobos, they had some sack races and games and things they did. But now, currently, it's a wonderful event. It's more of a family event. It's the second full weekend in August every year. That's been consistent for over 30 years that I've been going. We have a hobo jungle there. The hobo jungle is really a camp. Now, the old-time hobo jungle was where the hobos came to meet each other when they got off the rails, and they'd gather over by the railroad station in town, and they'd be around the town in the daytime talking to the tourists and stuff, but then at night they'd go to their own hobo jungle. The people really didn't go over and bother them too much, probably were a little afraid of them, of course. But today it's more of a family event. People come into the hobo jungle, talk to the hobos, have them sign autographs, take pictures of them. They bring their kids down to meet them. So it's changed over the years, but it's still considered a hobo jungle because that's where we all are and where our campfire is and, where many of us are sleeping. And then this is one of the reasons the hobos came to Britt for so many years, and we still go to Britt. We have a memorial service in the Hobo Cemetery. The Hobo Cemetery is a section of the local Evergreen Cemetery in Britt, and they've given us an area where we can bury the hobos that have caught the westbound in our community. We have a memorial service where we honor not only the hobos that are buried in the Britt Cemetery, but also the hobos that caught the westbound anywheres in the world, really, because some of them were actually World War II veterans. They never came home. So, and then we have a huge parade, and the highlight, of course, is the election of the King and Queen. The King and Queen are elected by the public, really. There's a lot of hobos there. The whole hobo community is included in this. They gather around this little gazebo now that they give up to a 2-minute speech on to say why they should be king or queen. And then there's judges spread around the audience. There's 6 judges, and they listen to the claps, and they come in to the head judge and tell him or her who they think got the most claps, and that person is the person that is elected king and queen. They're crowned with a blue robe and a red robe, and their crown is a straw hat with a Folgers coffee can attached to the top. And that's stored in the Hobo Museum and used every year. The Hobo Museum started in the late 1980s. A hobo historian, his name was George Horton, he walked into the local Chamber of Commerce. He had 2 boxes of hobo artifacts that he had been collecting, and he put them on the desk of the Chamber of Commerce lady, whose name was Willie Klein at the time, and said, here, you can have these. You know, I don't really have any place to keep this collection anymore. So that generated the idea, well, why don't we start a hobo museum in Britt? So back in 1974, a steam air hobo named Slow Motion Shorty had caught the westbound, and he had left several $1,000s with a nonprofit that was called the Hobo Foundation, that was organized also by coincidence in 1974 by 3 hobos. So the money was just kept in the bank account of the nonprofit for years. So then the city people and the hobos worked together. They found the Chief Theater downtown Britt that was empty, and they used Slow Motion Shorty's donation to purchase it. So opened as a hobo museum. You're talking 30 years ago now, somewhere around there. Since then, of course, all kinds of artifacts have come in, because what happened over the years, especially a lot of people in Britt had these hobo collections that they'd have hobos sign things, and sometimes hobo would give them gifts and stuff. And as they get older and older, and for various reasons, they donate their stuff to the Hobo Museum. The hobos themselves donated stuff. Artifacts come in from all over the country, so it's grown to be a world-class museum now with thousands of hobo-connected items. We have a nice collection of paintings. There's 2 really neat paintings in there. Hobo Joe had those commissioned. They're hobo jungle scenes, and what's unique about them, he had them himself painted into the picture, so in each jungle scene you can find Hobo Joe, which is kind of unique. There's a nice collection of various walking sticks. There's a quilt that was hand-embroidered by a hobo named Texas Madman. It's made of denim, and he sewed the sayings and the various things on the patches with string. Can you imagine hand-sewing a quilt together with string? I can't even imagine it. But he'd carry some patches in his little pack, and little by little he'd make this and assemble it. And there's some photography, crafts done by the hobos. There's a knot collection in there. Frisco Jack, he hoboed, and he was a merchant marine, and he was an expert knot tire. He donated a collection of knots. It's a pretty unique place. It's the only hobo artifacts museum in America, in the whole world for that matter. So it's one of the most unique museums anywhere that you could find, because it's amassed quite a collection of items. I've been on the board of directors for the Hobo Museum since 1992. Today there's a lot of steam air hobos still alive, but most of them, are in their 90s or over 100 years old. The genuine classic steam air hobo, which is the history that we're trying to preserve in Britt. We had only 1 steam air hobo come to Britt this year. His name is Minnesota Jim. He's 94 years old. There's other hobos still alive from that generation, but they don't necessarily come to Britt. So what we have today coming to Britt, not counting Minnesota Jim, is mostly what I would call rail riders. We have a lot younger generation coming in. They're riding trains from California to Minnesota and making their way to Britain and stuff. But I wouldn't call them a classic hobo anymore. The hobos that worked and wandered are pretty much gone. So today we have people that still ride trains. Some of them been riding trains since the 70s. They're heavy-duty rail riders. Still coming to the hobo convention and coming into the hobo jungle, where we share a lot of stories and history. There's still a lot of us, older people wandering around that are happy to talk about the hobos to anybody. There's a neat little restaurant in Britt called the Hobo House that has all kinds of hobo memorabilia on the walls and around the restaurant. So If people are interested in hobo history, the place to come is Britt, Iowa, and you can't do any better than that. You just never know who's going to be there, who's going to show up. Like some people, they come back year after year. I've actually been to 31 consecutive hobo conventions myself, and there's still a handful of us. Redbird Express and my sister have been there 31 years consecutively. Minneapolis Jewel has been there 41 consecutive years this year. She's 10 years ahead of us. So there's some really old timers there. And the most fun is meeting your friends. A lot of times you see people there that you haven't seen all year. You see them once a year. They show up in Britt. Sometimes you'll meet a unique person and you'll spend, a lot of time talking to them or socializing with them, and you'll never see them again. So I think it's probably the interactions with the various people that is the reason I keep going back to Britt personally. And of course, my father's buried there, Connecticut Slim. I think we mostly go for each other to meet our friends and honor our dead. That's really the big reason the hobos go, to honor our dead. When we have our hobo service out at the cemetery, at the end of the service, we all walk around and touch all the stones with our walking sticks to show the people that have caught the westbound honor. So that's a tradition that we have. That probably started, 40 years ago. I just think that Britt is a unique, wonderful, small town in Iowa that honors.
This is Our American Stories, and as you all know by now, some of our favorite stories to tell are stories about businesses, because these are the American dream often. The American dream is starting your own place. By the way, it also means coaching a football team, or starting a church, or being a nurse. But we have a general fondness of people who start businesses, because where do jobs come from? We previously told you the story of Jim Keyes and how he rose out of poverty to become the CEO of 7-Eleven and save the company from collapsing after filing for bankruptcy. Today, Jim joins us again to tell another story of 7-Eleven. Here's Jim with the story.
Around the time the company filed for bankruptcy, I went to my mentor at the time, the person who had encouraged me to come to 7-Eleven, a guy named John Thompson. He was the son of the founder of 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven started in 1927 with an ice house, an ice dock in Oak Cliff, just south of Dallas. And it was selling 50-pound blocks of ice to people to put in their, quote, their ice box. Literally, there was no refrigeration at the time. You couldn't just plug in a refrigerator. So it's hard to imagine that in 1927 we were still doing this. And how did you get ice to Dallas, Texas? So they were a very successful company, but it was quite a process to mine ice, literally, from the north, get it to the south, store it in an environment with no refrigeration. They had to store the ice literally underground, and to sell it in small blocks that people could put in their ice box to keep their milk and their eggs cold. So I went to John Thompson and said, should I leave the company? Have I made a bad career choice here? I've only been here for 5 years. I'm still a pretty young guy. You're bankrupt. We're bankrupt. People are saying 7-Eleven has no need to exist anymore because grocery stores were open 24 hours. Everyone else sold beer and cigarettes. And he said, that's precisely the problem. He said, if you go back, he said, I'll just tell you what my daddy told me, the story of the Frigidaire being invented sometime around 1928. He said, here we were selling ice. And we would have gone out of business by 1930. But my Uncle Johnny Green, he said, started asking customers what they want. And what they told him was, we don't come here for the ice, we come here for the convenience of buying ice from you, or how else are we going to get ice, right? So you make it convenient. Well, now we've got Frigidaire. We don't need ice anymore. We've got our own refrigerator to keep things cold. Why don't you sell us things to put in that more conveniently than having to run to the grocery store? And so they did. So that literally was the birth of the first convenience store, 7-Eleven, that was called Utotem at the time. And they emerged from there. John's lesson to me was that, he said, Jim, if you dial forward to 1990, 1991, we've gotten ourselves to the point now where we sell beer, soft drinks, and cigarettes, because those things used to be more convenient to buy here than somewhere else. But everybody sells those now. So your job is to find things that people need more conveniently. And if you can do that, there's no reason. He said convenience will never go away. Beer and cigarettes may diminish, but convenience will never die. And I took him to heart. I stayed with the company, started becoming obsessed with finding things, whether it was a multifunction ATM that we could put in every store, prepaid phone cards that I found in Asia and brought back to the United States, a beer with an aluminum bottle that you see now, everywhere, that we use to differentiate. I found that product in Asia and brought it back here to the United States and convinced Budweiser to make it first. And lots of ways to innovate with convenience, and that differentiation gave us 10 years of improved same-store sales and helped make my career. I talk a lot about the American dream now, and I talk a lot about being the beneficiary of the American dream, but I never really understood it or talked about it in personal terms until I discovered from my first-generation 7-Eleven franchisees what the American dream really was. And that occurred in a backwards way. Again, it occurred through crisis, through catastrophe. It happened on 9/11. I was on my way to work. I was actually stopping at the office to pick up a bag and head to New York City on 9/11. By the time I got to the office, of course, the first tower had been hit, and my flight was canceled, and we were all gathered around the TVs trying to figure out what was going on. And it wasn't long. It was probably right after the second tower fell, and there was now confirmation that this was a terrorist attack, that we started getting inbound calls about franchisees. We had, in the worst case, right in Chicago, we had an off-duty police officer go up to one of our franchisees, Sikh, Indian, a gentleman, put a gun to his head, said, "Go back home. You just blew up the World Trade Center." So it was a blanket stereotype of everyone in our stores, from Indians to Pakistanis to Mexican immigrants, who were running a store or in a store who were perceived to be the problem. That was a wake-up call for all of us. We invoked our Y2K protocol, which is, interestingly enough, we had just come through Y2K without any incident. But thankfully, we put a protocol in place that allowed us to communicate with every single store on an hourly basis in case there were problems. So we put that protocol in place, and we're shocked at the number of incidents that were occurring all over the country in our stores, where first-generation Americans were being persecuted for their image, not even their religion or their ethnicity, just for their image in the store as non-American, perceived to be non-American. So we put a number of things in place. We were the first to reach out to the American Red Cross and said, we want to bury our stores in red, white, and blue. We did the little red, white, and blue ribbons and started selling them for $1 with a contribution going to the Red Cross. We ended up raising like $300 million in the first 30 days to be able to help in some way. But our objective was somewhat selfish. We wanted to Americanize the stores and deflect this perception that people had that we were not American. Following that, I began to talk to franchisees. Why are we? We had been the butt of Jay Leno's jokes, David Letterman's jokes. Jay Leno one time gave me an award here in Dallas, and when I walked off stage, everyone was laughing, and I didn't understand why they were laughing, and I sat down and was told, he just, as soon as you walked off stage, said, "Can you believe it, a guy from 7-Eleven who speaks English?" And so I realized we've got a bad image here that is not, I mean, maybe it is true. Why are we so heavily minority in our stores? And I started asking franchisees, how'd you get here? Why did you become a 7-Eleven franchisee? And the stories were all very much the same. They were my story. I came from nothing, or I came from a country where I had things, and I came to this country with nothing. I came here with $500 in a suitcase, and I knew that hard work in this country would pay off. And so I found that if I go to a 7-Eleven store, I can work on my own. I can either work for another franchisee, and if I work really hard, they'll help me save enough money to get my own business. And then the harder I work, the more I can make. And if I want 2 stores or 3 stores, I can get those. That's 7-Eleven, that's Subway, that's McDonald's. It's the same story, and many of the franchisees are related. And so if you go to a place like Los Angeles, I found there are interrelated families where, one family would be successful and they'd invite another family to come work in their store, and then that would shoot off 5 more franchisees. And I realized this is the American dream. It's what these people, they've discovered the American dream. Here and in our own backyard, we have people that think there are no opportunities here. and they're not partaking of the American dream. So let's celebrate this. So I took them all to Ellis Island for the 75th anniversary of 7-Eleven. We were bringing a lot of international people to Ellis Island.